I was like ranting about something, just like traffic signs or something. And she was laughing really hard and she was like, "Who says that?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, where'd you get that from? Like, what comedian says that? And I was like, I don't know. I just made it up right now. I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, "Oh my God, you should do stand up." And so that was the first time it ever crossed my mind.
Get ready to laugh out loud with Daniel Eachus, a comedian who's been killing the game with his sharp wit and hilarious observations. From Fresno to Long Beach, Daniel's been making audiences laugh with his unique perspective on life. With a background in performing on cruises and releasing stand-up albums, Daniel's got stories to tell and jokes to share.
What are the top biggest mistakes a young comedian can make?
Mistake is that comics get comfortable with a certain type of show and go, oh, okay, I'm only going to do this type of show. I don't like open mics, or I don't like bar shows, or I don't like this thing. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Join us on the Stein Time Show as we dive into the world of comedy with this talented rising star. Let's get this laughter started.
All right, Daniel Eachus. Well, first off, right at the bat, what's background is Echus? What is that?
Oh, I thought you meant physically. I was like, well, it's a curtain I got from Walmart.
So you're sitting right in front of a blue curtain. Looks like you were getting ready to operate, which we
it is. I believe it's a shower curtain, and I've gone live before where people have been like, "Is this guy in the bathroom?"
If it was red, you look like you were in front of us, ready to do some stand-up.
Yeah, basically. Echus is apparently. It's funny, my whole family, like nobody knew for the longest time, and there were all these arguments, and I heard so many like weird theories, and then we end up finding out from doing a little research that it's English, of all things.
Okay, cool.
But to be fair, I did have a guy at a show tell me once, he was saying he was like some sort of like, I don't know what you call it, linguistic expert person, and he was saying that he thinks it's a Greek word, and I said, we're not Greek. He's like, well, that makes sense because English stole a lot from the Greeks, so I think it got stolen.
You're like, we're not English either. No.
Yeah.
You know what? It does sound Greek a little bit. Aegis.
Yeah.
So
there's still an air of mystery to it. We'll never fully know.
So let's go back then. I don't want to go back that far, but where were you born in LA? Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, I was born in the mean streets of Fresno, California. Shout out to the raisin capital of the world. I moved down to Long Beach, California in 2008, because I started comedy in 2009. So yeah, I've always been a California dog. Yeah.
What were you the funny kid in class? Why? When did you start saying, you know what, I want to do stand up? I want to get up on there and do it.
Yeah, it's an extremely long story, but the short story is that basically I was in high school and I was driving a friend home because we lived near each other, and I was like ranting about something, just like traffic signs or something, and she was laughing really hard and she was like, "Who says that?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, where'd you get that from? Like, what comedian says that? And I was like, I don't know. I just made it up right now. I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, "Oh my God, you should do stand up." And so that was the first time it ever crossed my mind. And then I did it sort of just as a one-time bucket list thing in Fresno before I left in a friend's backyard. And then when I moved down here, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, let me check out what a real show is that's not on someone's porch.
Yeah. And then was it typical, your first show was great, second show was not so great, or what was that like?
First show was pretty good. A lot of it had, first real show. I never count that backyard show. Yeah, when did I start? I don't really consider that like backyard show to be like a real show. I always thought that was like, first off, I did 45 minutes because I thought that's what comedians did. I'd never been to a live show. I'd only ever seen comedy on TV, and it was like an hour special with commercials. I was like, it's about 45 minutes. So that it's crazy what you're capable of when you're not smart enough to know what's actually going on in the room.
I did 25 minutes for my first time, so it was the
Nice.
same theory. I'm like, well, that's what the HBO special is. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like I mean, it's like if you think if you think a song is an hour long, you're gonna come up with an hour long song because you think that's what it is. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I just thought that's how it went. So it was good. I mean, it was a lot of my friends, and I remember her parents who were not supposed to be there snuck in and were watching in the back, and they were laughing, and that's what kind of always stuck with me. It was like they weren't even my friends, and they were like laughing at this. So when I did my first like quote unquote real show at an open mic, my first like just show in front of strangers, I'll call it, in 2009, they were like, yeah, you do 3 minutes, and I was like, I've done 45, so sure. And so my first open mic wasn't terrible, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that like, well, out of 45 minutes, I could find a decent 3, and I was just picking the best jokes and putting it together and not really realizing that's kind of how you're supposed to do it, tightening things up. And so I had a decent like first time, I would say.
Yeah. Now, where was that open mic first time?
That was at a coffee shop in downtown Long Beach. And I went because it was a mixed mic. It was music, mostly music and comedy. And I was in the dorms at Long Beach State at the time. And every Friday morning, I was like one of the only people who had a Friday morning class, a rookie move. And there was this other guy who I would hear singing in the shower every morning. Never saw his face. He was singing in the shower. And honestly, he was really, really good. And so finally, like a month or two in, we're finally brushing our teeth at the same time. And I'm like, are you that guy who sings in the shower? And this Hawaiian guy who's like, oh, I'm sorry, man. Like, I was like, no. I was going to say it was really good. And he's like, oh, thanks. And I was like, have you ever gone to like an open mic? And he's like, what's that? And I like kind of told him what it was supposed to be. I'd never been either. And I was like, I've been thinking of going and trying comedy. Do you want to go and just like try music? And he was like, sure. And so that's the reason we picked that one. And for the first year, it was a lot of traveling to music mics, which helped me a lot, I think, doing comedy, not performing in front of a bunch of comedians, which I would say the average person doesn't realize is not a good thing to do for your career.
Were other comedians going to these music mics as well?
A couple, but not that many. And a lot of them were like, we don't like comedy at all. But because my friend was so good at music, they were like, all right, fine. Like, if he has to come with you, then fine. And then I would go up and try my best stuff because I wanted to impress all the people. And they'd be like, okay, that was cool. You can keep coming back. And so I kind of got an in at a lot of these mics that comedians couldn't do. But some of them, other comics would come as well.
I guess either way you're screwed because when you do an open mic, no one's there to laugh, and when you do an open mic, for music, no one's there to laugh. But
yeah,
at least you're not performing for other comedians, which it's surefire, no laughter.
Yeah. I would say the one thing that kind of, I don't want to say like hurt me, but like was a disadvantage is that my first time ever at an open mic was as a performer. And I didn't really think much about it at the time, but it's sort of weird to be performing. And then all of a sudden, boom, it was like I was performing at all these open mics. And it was like, it's a weird position to be in when you're performing in front of a bunch of people who you don't know anything about. I didn't know what it was like to be just an audience member at an open mic. Like, I didn't know, like, who are these people? Why are these people here? Like, you mean there's people who just like go to a coffee shop every Wednesday to listen to music? Like, I didn't understand these people.
Talk about that in your routine?
I didn't realize till later how weird. What's that?
Did you talk about that in your routine?
No, it wasn't something I noticed till much later that I was like, I guess I don't know what it's like to be an adult who just goes to open mics. Like, it didn't really occur to me till later,
That right there is good fodder. I think that I would like to see that routine. There's somebody that says like, why are you guys here? It's like, I mean, I'm glad you're here, but why, and it's like, I don't know what it's like to be you guys. Would be a funny observation, and then that opens the door for maybe some riffing, some crowd work, and to be kind
I
of.
think a lot of people, I would imagine, sort of just fall into it, like, you go there. I would say there's a lot of people who were just there at the coffee shop and all of a sudden it started and they're like, what is this? And next thing they know, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna come back, again, there was that open, and then next thing you know, you're a regular, or you come see a friend or something. But either way, like,
parallels you can compare that to, I guess,
yeah.
my friend said try this, and then I did one time, and then I'm hooked, and now why am I trying to write right now? And I'm like strung out on chickens. Okay, so so how many times did you start going up during a week at that point in the beginning?
Yeah, right off the bat, it was like 5 times a week. The one thing I did before I started, so I moved down to Long Beach State, couldn't get this comedy thing out of my mind, and my first instinct was, I won't say it was before YouTube or anything, but people weren't really posting stand-up clips, Mm-hmm. So my instinct was to start going to the library at Long Beach State and just checking out books, not on how to do comedy, but about, they were all autobiographies and biographies about like people's lives. And that's sort of classic for comedians. But one of the first books I got was Steve Martin's Born Standing Up, which is just an autobiography about his life and how he started comedy and all that. And that was important to me for several reasons, but the most important was that he went to Long Beach State, which is where I was in college. And so there's a part in it very early on where he talks about walking the path to the classrooms, thinking of jokes. And it was like, oh my God, I do that. Yeah, I did that yesterday. I'm doing that today. Like, this is so, and so it grounded everything for me. It was like, here's this like mythical guy who was like a comedian, actor, everything that I wanted to be. And he's where I am right. He was where I am right now, and that was an important, like, early lesson for me that like, okay, there is a path. It is possible. Like, you just need to start taking the baby steps to get there. And part of that was just going up a lot. He talked about it in this book, but every book that I read, one of the common through lines with it was just how much they performed. And so I knew very early on, like, okay, I got to get up a lot.
Yeah, I could feel that's amazing. I could feel that you going through that. That's awesome. That's cool. You're going to school and you're reading that, and that's great. So, what was your material like? What did you gravitate towards talking about back then and when you first started?
Oh man, I'm trying to think. I actually don't remember that open mic set, what I ended up doing. I remember in particular, it was just like, I was, that very first show I did, I was 17. What does a 17-year-old talk about to try to relate to people? It's usually like things you see on TV. I remember I had a bit about how Osama bin Laden could possibly be Batman, because he was hiding out in a cave and like all this, and like maybe that's what he was. It was like, like as a 17-year-old, I knew nothing about. That's
good.
Yeah, but it was it wasn't like the day that it wasn't like, oh yeah, getting your first car is weird, not like that. It was just sort of like the things I found funny in life, I guess.
Yeah. So when did you really start to hit your stride? When you felt, well, I know you probably said, I still don't feel, every comedian says that.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully next year.
Exactly. But when did you really, really feel there's a point where you're like, you could see the punches a little slower. You see the pitch, the fastballs look a little slower. How much you were going up 5 days a week? After how much time would you say really, did you have to put in? Because it's good for a lot of young comedians listen to the show, and they'll be like, I want them to understand. It's like everybody's different, but it takes a while for those pitches to slow down to where you're like, okay, that joke didn't go well. I got to navigate out of this. Now I got to get into that. That's how this. Yeah. Okay. Oh no, I got to shift now. Oh, that's happening now. I'm just going to have to talk to the person there or just do whatever. Those are decisions that you really need to get comfortable with. How long did it take you to get that feeling, you think?
Yeah, for some reason, I have noticed that the 4-year mark is always important for comedians. I don't know why. I saw it with myself, but I kept seeing it. Like every time a comedian was like starting to get it, it was around year 4. I don't know why, but not that that's always the case, but I noticed it a lot with me around year 4. So pretty early on, I got into this nationwide contest called that Comedy Central was doing, called Comedy Central's Up Next, and they were partnering with the Improvs. And I was literally peeing at a urinal on a show at one of the Improvs, I think Brea or something. And I saw a poster for it, and I was like, "Oh my God, how do I get on that?" So I started asking around, and finally found out, like, "Oh, okay, how to get on it." It wasn't like it wasn't, the whole thing wasn't televised. It was like the Improvs were all having these preliminary rounds, every Improv, and then the winners of that would go on to the next round and the next round, and finally in the regional finals, they would film that and post clips on Comedy Central and Sirius XM on Comedy Central's network and all that stuff. It was a long shot to actually get to that point. My first preliminary round, there were 25 comedians in my round, and they were picking one, and this was a judge's vote. It was like Improv execs and Comedy Central people who were choosing. So like, I don't think I'll win, but if I could just even do well, I'll be happy with myself. And long story short, I ended up winning and going on to the next round, and pretty soon I made it to the finals. And for me, who's like 4 years in, I remember getting to the finals of that contest, and immediately it was like I was surrounded by all these Comedy Central people who were just like, "Hey, Daniel, what's up? Are you still doing improv on Friday nights at this place? And are you still doing this? Are you still doing that?" And it was just this eye-opening experience of like, oh my God, what I post online, like what people are watching this. This is what I'm doing is mattering. And I don't even really know how to put that into words as much as like, it just sort of, it was mind blowing to me that like this thing that felt like nothing. It felt like I would just post random things on Facebook sometimes or Twitter or like, and go do shows that I thought didn't really matter. I was like, at some point, oh my God, now it's mattering. They've been watching the whole time. And so that was sort of one big experience where I realized I need to start not necessarily being more strategic with what I do, but just realizing that like, okay, you're not like, you're in this now, right. Whether it's one person watching or a million, you're in it. Like this is the journey. So having this mindset of like, oh, I'll just do more shows and one day I'll get there. It's like, no, this whole process you are there. You might be closer at different points in your career, but you're already there. So that everything you do matters in comedy, which led me to my next big revelation, which was that I felt like I had, for the first few years, I had compartmentalized, and I think a lot of new comics do this, stand-up in my life. I was a student by day, I was a regular guy, and at night, I was a comedian.
Right.
And after that Comedy Central thing, or during it, I realized that like, as a comedian, you have to become, you are that. It's you. Like they have to meld to get the you on stage is you in real life, and vice versa. Like you are this person. And I'm not saying like, oh, you got to be that guy who's on all the time and making jokes at the funeral. No, not that. But like this idea of living two separate lives it can't happen. You have to become the person you are in real life. You have to become on stage. And you just always have to be ready. Like you have to become the comedian. You can't have it be a job that you clock in and out of.
I like that. I think that's true. I think that it can be said for a lot of things. To just be, it's almost very Zen-like. You have to be such a Zen type of person to be a comedian, because you have to constantly move forward like a shark in your life and your material and your jokes and your performing. It's just constant movement forward, examining and adjusting and moving forward. It's just constantly moving. It's a very Zen-like type of existence.
Yeah, it's very like self-reflective journey, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's really just the journey of learning about yourself. That's really it. And it's constantly that, you know, even, you know, pick a successful comedian, Bill Burr or something like that. Like, you don't get to a point where he's just like, yeah, I know myself, because then things happen in your life. Maybe you get married, maybe you have kids, maybe like you move or something where you go, okay, now what's the new me? Like, how am I changing? What is older me like compared to younger me? Or just the idea of like thinking of yourself as older compared to you. How's that like? So you just, as human beings, we're constantly changing. So that sort of like self-reflective journey never goes away. We're just always thinking about like, where am I at in life right now? And what does this mean? And that's extremely hard to do.
Right. Yeah. That's comedians do. Where are you at today in your career, in your life, personally? What's going on with you?
Well, I'm in Long Beach for a shower curtain, physically. Mentally, I'm in the Bahamas right now. No, well, kind of on that note, I have took a lot of cruises this year. Been doing a lot of like performing on cruises. Which was sort of kind of an accident. I didn't mean to take so many, but it's been a really interesting journey. I've learned a lot. It's, you know, wild every time. I finished my second stand-up album with 800 Pound Gorilla Records a couple years ago. There was kind of a delay in it coming out. It has finally like really like came out last year, and so now I'm in the process of like working on a third one. And also I had done a dry bar special. I have all this material from the other albums, and plus new stuff that I've been working on where I really want to record another stand-up special. So I'm in that boat where I'm working on a third album and a second special. And we're just seeing, I don't know, what happens next, I guess.
Cool. Well, long-term play, super long-term, what do you got planned for yourself?
I don't know. I don't know if I know the answer to that. I'm just kind of following the creative flow. I feel like in comedy, it's sort of important to be open-minded just because you never know where your career is going to be. I mean, I think a good example of that everyone really, but take only because I just saw his Hot Ones episode of Conan O'Brien, right? Mm-hmm. There's a guy who probably told himself he was going to be a writer his whole life, writing on SNL and for The Simpsons and all that. And then, flash forward and he was like the host of a talk show. I don't think he ever imagined that's where his career was going. So I like to just like stay kind of open-minded with that. I don't want to be like, no, I'm a guy who only does stand-up on Netflix. That's what I'm doing, because who knows? Maybe someday an opportunity will come up and I'll be doing SNL or something, which I never imagined I'd be doing. So I'm just sort of always constantly working on comedy. I don't ever plan on stopping stand-up. I'm definitely always working on, getting more views on specials and albums and touring and all that stuff. But as far as like, whether it's acting or ending up on a show or anything like that, I'm really open to anything right now.
Well, it's like the old story. I always say this, when a comedian says, I don't have anything planned, I said, that's okay, because I feel like the majority of comedians, some of them plan everything out, they're like little Tony Robbins in their career, which is great. Nothing wrong with that either. But I envision a romantic look on comedians as they are like Caine from Kung Fu. They're wandering the earth. And it's a show from the 70s, by the way. They're younger. And basically just wandering the earth, as a martial artist, trying to find, I think he's searching for somebody, but I think he's also trying to search for a higher consciousness, where the path takes him, and he'll know when he gets there that it's the right time for him to either settle in that area or just be, just being, he's just doing.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like I had said earlier, but, you realize like this is this is the journey. Like, you're already in it. There's no like, oh, once I do this and that and that, and then I'll be on this whole path of being a stand-up comedian. It's like, we're already there. So like, you're doing it. You're probably not as far along as you want to be. You probably never will be, but like, you're there, you're doing it. So
what are the top five? Yeah, all right. Let's do top five. What are the top five biggest mistakes a young comedian can make?
Oh man. Listening to top five lists.
There you go.
Oh, actually, that's probably one of them. Is definitely taking rules to heart. I one very important lesson I learned early on is it was one of my first times featuring at a gig, and I was featuring for a headliner in like Northern California, and I was writing on my set before, and I felt like I was in a good place with comedy where I was ready. I was ready to feature. I was like having good sets. I was like, I'm ready for a longer one. This was probably like 15-minute set or something. It wasn't a full half hour yet, but I was writing on my set before the show, and the headliner comes up to me, and he's a very nice guy, but he was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm writing on my set. And he's like, no, don't do that. And I was like, why? And he was like, you're going to be too structured. You're going to be too in your head about sticking to the set. Don't do that. Never write out your set. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I wrote out my set, and I went up there and I killed it, and he had a bad set. So it was an important lesson for me, not to not write out your set, not to write your set, is that do what works for you, you know? But at the same time, be open to trying new things. Like, you know, I think it was worth giving a shot. And I definitely have done sets where I was like, let me try not writing it out. I would give it a shot. If that doesn't work for me, then, you know, okay, then I won't do that ever again. Maybe you'll find out like, oh, he is actually right. That is good for me. I shouldn't write out a set. Give everything a try, but don't be like, this is the rule. This comedian told me, because that's their rule, you know? Maybe he doesn't write out a set and it's great for him, but for me, I don't look at it, and half the time I don't stick to it, but I like having it in my pocket to know where the roadmap is, just in my head. So that would be one big mistake is taking every rule to heart. But secondly, kind of in contrast to that, like realizing that like if enough comedians are telling you something, you should there's probably some truth to it. You know, if enough comedians are telling you like, hey, you need to slow down, you talk too fast, then maybe you should try doing that. Maybe that's not the answer. Maybe you try it and it doesn't work, but like there's probably a nugget of truth in that. So listening to what people are trying to tell you. I also think comedy, it's not a game of quantity. Quality definitely trumps quality. Quality definitely trumps quantity any day when it comes to stand-up sets. I knew a lot of guys very early on who were just like, gotta do, oh my God.
So quality versus quantity, you know,
I feel like I knew a lot of comics early on who'd be like, you gotta do 5 sets a night, bro. You know, 5 sets a night or whatever it is, 3 sets a night or, you know, 15 shows a week. That's what I'm doing. And you know, to a degree, that's great. And I feel like as a comic, you know, every comic, like if you've never tried that one time in your life, like it's worth having one of those insane weeks or just like a month where you're just like, I just got a ton. But at some point when it becomes like a rule for yourself, where you're just like, I'm doing this many shows a night. I've seen so many comics fall into that trap of like, okay, you did 5 sets tonight. One of them was at an open mic with 5 comedians. The other one was at a mic with 2 people in there. Another one, you know, nobody showed up, and it was just like you performing for yourself because no one's, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, okay, well, how many sets did you actually do? Because, you know, you did 5 terrible shows, quote unquote, tonight, and this person did 1 great set at a comedy club and tried, you know, some new bits and got a real read on where their material was and who actually got more out of tonight. And it every single time, 10 times out of 10, it's the quality show person. So realizing that like doing a lot of shows, yes, is important. And you definitely on the opposite side can't be the person who goes like, oh, I do one show a year and that's my thing. You need to do a lot of shows, but maybe at some point you need to stop and ask yourself like, okay, did I really get much out of this show and not to keep getting off topic, it is important to also like, that's not to say never. Sometimes it's good to learn like, okay, what do you do when there's only 2 people in the crowd? Like, you're at a bar and it's a terrible show. Like you do need to learn how to deal with that. Do you need to learn how to deal with that every night? No. But, you should put yourself into that situation, which would be, I guess, my 4th mistake, is that comics get comfortable with a certain type of show and go, oh, okay, I'm only going to do this type of show. Oh, I did those. Like, I don't like open mics, or I don't like bar shows, or I don't like this thing. Like, I'm not going to do that. I would say, there's comedians who are maybe Seinfeld can do that, but you can't. The average comedian, like you should get up in as many types of shows as possible, and don't be like, oh, I only work at this comedy club because like I don't do well at open mics. So I was like, well, figure out how to do well at open mics. Put yourself into that situation. Maybe you got to change up your strategy. Maybe you're not good at telling story jokes. Maybe, and this type of show, it thrives on story jokes. Well, figure out what a story joke would be for you and go try it on this show. And what's a fifth thing? It's a long game, and a lot of comedians have it in their head. Maybe it's different times for everyone, that it's going to take X amount of time, or man, like if there's one thing I've learned over the past, it's been 15 years that I've been doing comedy. It's that I have seen so many different types of timelines for successful careers. And I've seen so many different ways people have made it, and so many different ways that people have ended up quitting. Everyone really is different. And, to give yourself like, oh, if I don't make it in 4 years, I quit, or I better be somewhere in 1 year, else I must be terrible. Like, man, I've seen people make it in 1 year, and you're like, wow, this person just shot up to stardom, and maybe they fall fast from it because they weren't really ready. But I've seen everything happen at this point. So to have it in your mind that comedy has to go a certain way in terms of where your career is a huge mistake. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep working on what you're working on. Like, it'll happen, because it is equal parts hard work and luck. And sometimes that luck part you just have no control over. You have to be in the right place at the right time, but you also have to be ready when you're there. And so you might be ready and you just have not had that luck, and the right person hasn't seen you, or the right person sees you very early on in your career. You got super lucky. Anything can happen, but the part you can control is the hard work part of it. So just worry about that.
I always say you got to work really hard to put yourself in a lucky situation.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
That seems like to be the case with so much of comedians. Daniel Eachus, wonderful, great sage advice. Tell everybody how they can find out more about you.
Oh, yeah. I have a website, Daniel Eachus, Daniel, the word each, EACH, us, DanielEachus.com. I'll post like my next 10 shows, whatever. And then on all social media at Dan Eachus, no space or anything like that. And I got a couple albums out on everything, and a book as well that I had just written on. It's on Amazon. So
what's the book called?
The book is called A Day at the Zoo in 2062. It's for adults. Sounds like a kid's book, but it's a bunch of short stories, comedic short stories, and that info is on my website. And if you just type in Daniel Eachus on Amazon, it'll pop up. So
great title.
Thanks.
Piques the interest. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Gear up for your next adventure and head over to bolotor.com to check out the amazing Bolo Pack and their other innovative outdoor gear. Catch you next time.